My name is Lauren Cooper. I am the lead of the Forest Carbon and Climate program at Michigan State University, and we're so pleased to lead this learning exchange session for the Forest Climate Working Group. I know we have some folks from outside of that group, including some colleagues here in the department and our partnering organizations, so I wanted to offer a quick description of the group. The Forest Climate Working Group is a diverse group of forest interests, including landowners, industry, conservationists, academia, and those active with carbon markets. The group has worked together for more than 8 years to advocate for state and federal policies that work to ensure sustainable forest use and prevention of land use change. And we've currently been in the process of reinvigorating our focus and activities, and we welcome inquiries into our work. So please reach out if you have questions or you think your organization may be interested in learning more about the Forest Climate Working Group. Today we have some great speakers. First, we have Jeff Williams, the National Program Manager of the Healthy Forest Reserve Program at the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, or the NRCS. He will be talking about the Healthy Forest Reserve Program's work in restoring and protecting private forests, the program's goals and objectives, land and landowner eligibility criteria, funds obligated, and acres enrolled. Then we have Rita Hite of the American Forest Foundation, where she is the Executive Vice President of the American Tree Farm System, Woodlands, and Policy. Rita will provide an update on forests in the Farm Bill Coalition. With the Farm Bill set to expire in just a few months, the Forest in the Farm Bill Coalition is actively working with Congress to secure support for forest priorities in this important legislation, including the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. Rita will discuss the Coalition's latest activities, along with the latest on the Healthy Forest Reserve Program and other programs that have carbon and climate mitigation benefits. Before we start, though, a couple of details. We're also announcing the 2018 Learning Series for the whole year. These are going to take place on the first Wednesday of every month throughout 2018 from 3 to 4 p.m. We are currently securing speakers for the specific dates, and we will have more on that soon. But if you'd like to join our mailing list, you can be sure to get the most up-to-date information and invitations from us to join the webinars. Also, our next speaker is going to be Rachel Steele, the National Climate Hubs Coordinator at the USDA Climate Hubs. She'll be speaking on April 4th at 3 p.m. and providing a brief overview of the USDA Climate Hubs, the recent accomplishments, and where the organization is headed in 2018 and beyond. So again, please reach out to us by email, forestc@msu.edu, to automatically receive updates on this. And a couple of other housekeeping things. Please make sure you're muted if you're on your phone, even though I think that shouldn't be an issue with our new service. Also wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we will post the recording and any supplemental resources, including the presentation slides, in the next week or so. So since you're registered, you'll receive an email letting you know where to find that. We will hold questions until the end. And on the Zoom interface, you can hopefully see the little chat box in the bottom right corner. Has a little drop-down triangle next to it. And here you can offer up questions at any point throughout the presentations, and we'll compile and present questions to the speakers in a Q&A at the end, time permitting. If you're calling in by phone, but you'd like to submit a question, feel free to email us at forestc@msu.edu, and we can add your question to the list. And in the case of outstanding questions, we'll work with the speakers and create a document answering those questions that will be uploaded with the presentation materials. So that's it for the background. Jeff, could you please take the screen and begin your presentation?
Okay. Thank you, Lauren and Lauren. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right. And I'd like to say thank Dave Cleaves as well for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to discuss this program. So this is the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, restoring and protecting private forests. This photo here is a recent tour we took in the Florida Panhandle for an RCPP project, which I will talk about that program a little bit later in my presentation. I don't expect the slides to take real long. I usually talk pretty fast, so if I'm going too fast, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will try to cover it a little bit more slowly and thoroughly. So first off, I'd like to talk about Healthy Forest Reserve Program is a voluntary program established to assist private landowners to restore and enhance forest land. There's 3 purposes: to promote the recovery of threatened and endangered species, to improve plant and animal diversity, and to enhance carbon sequestration. Specifically, I understand there's interest in carbon sequestration. It is discussed in legislation fairly broadly. This is the points where I see it discussed in policy. To the extent practical, eligible practices and measures will improve biodiversity and optimize the sequestration of carbon through management that maintains diverse and high-quality native forests to accomplish the goals of the restoration plan. In addition, states may consider the potential for increased carbon sequestration if the lands in question are enrolled in the program for ranking projects. So carbon sequestration can be used by the states as far as ranking projects, comparing projects, seeing if they should be funded or not. States can decide how many points, what percentage, what portion carbon sequestration would provide. Healthy Forest Reserve Program under HFRP, NRCS purchases easements to protect or restore privately owned or tribal land. Currently, HFRP is not traditionally funded through the Farm Bill. However, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, has provided opportunities for partners to submit HFRP proposals. I'm gonna just slide up and cheat on my notes here real quick so you're not hallucinating, your screen's getting a little smaller. So the program was authorized in 2003 with the Healthy Forest Restoration Act and was later amended by the 2008 Food and Energy Act, Agriculture Act of 2014. The program is currently authorized through 2018. The Healthy Forest Reserve Program is designed to assist private landowners to restore and enhance their private forest land. The goals of the program are to promote the recovery of threatened and endangered species. I think I've mentioned these already. I'll say them again. Improve plant and animal diversity, and to enhance carbon sequestration. Slide that down. So again, HFRP was authorized as part of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2013. It was amended, the latest amendment was enacted on February 7th of 2015. HFRP has many programmatic similarities to the older, some of you may be aware of the Wetland Reserve Program, or we call it WRP, and the current Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, the Wetland Reserve Easement component. So a lot of the similarities between WRE and WRP exist. So you also find additional language in Title 8, Section 8203 of the Agriculture Act of 2014. $12 million was authorized for 2014 to 2018. However, no appropriation was received. Just for straight HFRP, we did get some through RCP. I have a couple of success stories I'll talk about in here. Andy Peterson is a participant in the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. Is a voluntary easement program designed for the purpose of restoring and enhancing forest ecosystems. In Oregon, the program focuses on the recovery of the threatened northern spotted owl. The landowner said, "This program fits our goals," said Andy. "We are able to harvest, and there are some specific guidelines to help establish spotted owl habitat, but we can still make a living off the land, which is important. We can't afford not to. We're able to, but we are able to with this program." So HFRP is often referred to as a working lands conservation easement program. So that's kind of a unique program compared to some that are just mostly restoration and protection. So for HFRP program requirements, NRCS purchases 30-year or perpetual easements. It enters into 30-year contracts with tribes or 10-year cost share agreements with eligible landowners. Landowners agree to implement the plan which restores, protects, enhances, maintains, and manages habitats to increase likelihood of recovery of listed species under the ESA, Endangered Species Act, to measurably improve well-being of candidate species, state-listed species, or species identified by the chief of the NRCS. NRCS may provide cost share assistance for activities that promote ecosystem functions and values. Such activities may be carried out by the landowner or other NRCS designated. So we can do landowner contracts or federal contracts. Again, here's just another picture of some potential HFRP land in Florida. Landowner eligibility. Individual or entity must be the owner of the eligible private land or qualify under the definition of acreage owned by an Indian tribe. Unlike most of the Farm Bill programs, adjusted gross income, or AGI, and, oh, I forgot to spell it out, HELWC, highly erodible land, water, wetland compliance eligibility are not required under HFRP. This is a major departure from other Farm Bill programs. In addition, landowner must agree to other information NRCS necessary. Land eligibility. Land must be privately owned or owned by Indian tribes. Lands may be included in the program based on the likelihood of successful restoration, enhancement, and protection of the forest ecosystem functions and values when considering the costs of enrollment, restoration, protection, enhancement, maintenance, and management. Land must measurably increase the likelihood of recovery of the threatened or endangered species, candidate species, state-listed species, or species, or special concern species. Land must improve biological diversity and increase carbon sequestration. Here's an example in Florida. The Coastal Headwaters Forest Project is a public-private partnership that will provide restoration of longleaf pine and permanent protection of working forests across the Mobile, and other watersheds in Alabama and Florida. The primary objectives of Coastal Headwaters are to establish conservation easements to protect the lands as working longleaf pine forests in perpetuity, support working forest-related economic development in local communities, and create and expand markets for longleaf pine products. Provide ecological benefits for plants and animals inherent to the longleaf ecosystem. Easement participation requirements. The deed shall require the easement area be maintained in accordance to the HFRP plan, completed by NRCS and the landowner for the life of the easement. Landowner must cooperate in the restoration, protection, enhancement, maintenance, and management of the land in accordance with the easement and terms of the plan. Conservation easement deed describes the permissions, restrictions, prohibitions, and reserved rights by the landowner. So again, this is a conservation easement. It is not a fee title. 30-year contract requirements. The contract shall require easement area be maintained in accordance with the HFRP plan for the life of the contract. The landowner must cooperate in the restoration, protection, enhancement, maintenance, and management of the land in accordance with the contract and terms of the plan. HFRP restoration plans and landowner protections. The plan shall be made through NRCS, who shall consult with the program participant, Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Marine Fisheries Service as appropriate. Plan shall specify the manner in which the land will be restored, enhanced, protected, maintained, and managed. I think this is Pennsylvania. So productive partnerships are crucial to safeguarding the survival of the Indiana bat and to increase existing populations. For this federally endangered species, Pennsylvania NRCS assumes an essential responsibility. The Healthy Forest Reserve Program through NRCS is designed to assist private landowners in restoring, enhancing, and protecting forest land resources. In Pennsylvania, this funding is used to protect and improve critical habitat for the Indiana bat through the acquisition, conservation easements, and the implementation of selected conservation practices to improve habitat. Here is a very small map for you to try to see. Basically, there's 13 states that have, in the past, qualified and been selected for funding in the United States. And I noted California and Maine didn't show up on here. These are just apparently. This is just an example of some practices: prescribed burning, fire breaks, forest site prep, tree shrub establishment, upland wildlife, habitat management, and forest harvest trails, landings, etc. Are potential treatments, practices that could be considered in HFRP. That is in no way all-inclusive. Okay, HFRP, financial assistance dollars, acres, and enrollments. So from 2009 up to 2007, there's been approximately $42 million obligated in financial assistance. That's about 676,000 acres protected or actively being protected. This is where I need my notes. And then there's about 105 enrollments, which means either contracts or easements. So the states included under the traditional HFRP are Arkansas, California, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Maine, Michigan, Mississippi, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. So most of these acres are actually in a few restoration, long-term 10-year restoration agreements. So a lot of these acres that are being protected are just really fairly short-term. Here's a table, essentially, by year, showing obligation by year. I'm not sure how exciting that is for you. And I think I mentioned this before, HFRP and RCPP. HFRP has not been funded, appropriated for several years, which has directly affected the amount of dollars obligated to restoration and conservation easements as seen by lower annual enrollments and acres protected. However, under the provisions of RCPP, HFRP has seen a resurgence in interest from partners who bring comprehensive strategies and leverage conservation investments to address landscape scale natural resource challenges. So under our CPP and HFRP, we've awarded approximately $49 million in financial assistance, approximately $5 million in technical assistance, and partners have contributed, plan on contributing $1.5 million. That brings total value of the 16 RCPP projects using the HFRP program to about $55 million. And just one last shot of the Florida landscape. And that is it.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jeff. That was really interesting. I'm sure we're going to have some great questions about that. But before we dive into the questions, and particularly since you guys are on such similar topics, Rita, why don't we have you take the screen and dive into your presentation.
Great, thanks, Lauren. And I'm assuming y'all can see my screen.
Looks good.
All right. As you can see, I went for some spring colors because it is spring, darn it. So what I will do to build on Jeff's remarks is really to highlight where things stand with the expiration of the Farm Bill and what we can expect from a policy change perspective, in particular with the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. And in particular, I think the reason why we're focusing on this program is this is one of the one of the only Farm Bill conservation programs that very distinctly has carbon sequestration as one of its goals. That doesn't mean that the Farm Bill doesn't support carbon sequestration in a lot of other ways. So I'll talk about that as well. So what I'll hit today is, what does the Farm Bill do for forests right now? What can we expect in 18? And then what are some key priorities from a policy perspective in 18? So the current Farm Bill, and I get this question asked a lot. Why the heck do you care about the Farm Bill? It's about agriculture and it's about nutrition. Is it really about forests? And AFF does a regular Forests in the Farm Bill progress report to really understand how the Farm Bill is supporting private forests in the US. And our estimate is that over the last 3 years, since 2014, the Farm Bill has provided about $1.8 billion for private forests. And so this is all the programs that impact private forests, everything from the Healthy Forest Reserve Program to the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which helps provide cost share assistance for landowners to implement specific practices, which again, all of these things have carbon implications. For example, under EQIP, you could do afforestation, reforestation, improved forest management, et cetera. So that 1.86 billion, and we estimate that that translates into impacting about 9,000 acres a day of private forests in the US are impacted by those Farm Bill dollars. 9,000 acres a day. I am not a scientist or a mathematician, but I'm sure Dave Cleese is very quickly calculating how much carbon that it translates into, and it's a pretty significant number. So again, pretty strong impact on our forests and our private forests in particular in the US. The Farm Bill also, while it provides dollars for private forests, it also is a mechanism to drive policy change. So for example, the Forest Climate Working Group has for a long time believed that we not only have to support forests, but we also have to support the use of forest products as a key strategy for mitigating and addressing climate change. So for example, the last Farm Bill improved USDA's bio-based program, which helps ensure that forest products can participate in federal purchasing of bio-based products. So again, a market opportunity to increase the use of forest products, which has carbon benefits as well. So here's just a table of the funding provided through the various programs. And my numbers are a little different than Jeff's because I use a different slice here, but as you can see, HFRP, as Jeff mentioned, not funded with mandatory dollars. It does have a discretionary authorization at 12 million, but it's not been funded. And then it only has received money through our CPP. You can see here the throughout all these other programs, though, the dollars that are going in, again, these are broad. This is for all the programs, not specific to forests necessarily. So you can see the dollars for EQIP and the Conservation Stewardship Program, et cetera. But this is the range of programs in the Farm Bill that impact forests. And just another little snapshot of kind of the impact of the Farm Bill programs. We've seen a pretty significant increase in the investment that Farm Bill programs have put into private forests in the US. As you can see, we've nearly doubled, actually more than doubled, the amount of funding in EQIP. This is just EQIP alone, combined with WIP, which is an old wildlife program. You can see that there's been a pretty significant increase in just EQIP alone in the dollars going towards forestry. And again, these are practices like afforestation, planting trees, reforestation, improved forest management, all those things that the Forest Climate Working Group has emphasized as key strategies for addressing climate change. Jeff mentioned the Healthy Forest Reserve Program in those active states. So here's just another slice at the data and the states that are participating in that program. Most, as he said, have been when HFRP did have funding from the 2008 Farm Bill, but then that funding, 2008, and then that funding went away in the 2014, and we rely on RCPP for most of that funding at this point, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So that's just a little background on what the Farm Bill does for forests currently. So let's talk about what we can expect for the 2018 Farm Bill, kind of the big picture. And the big picture is the current Farm Bill expires, as Lauren mentioned at the beginning of this call, at the end of September of 2018. So Congress, in theory, has to act by the end of September of 2018 to ensure that these conservation programs, but also to ensure that the commodity programs that are funded through the Farm Bill, as well as the nutrition programs, and a whole range of other things that Americans all across the board rely on, continue to be funded and supported. What we are hearing now in terms of the timing of the process, so neither the House or Senate Agriculture Committee have acted yet on their bill. We are hearing that any day now, the House in particular could move forward, and we're thinking the late March, April timeline for them to act. And then the Senate could move soon after, although the Senate seems to be on a different timeline, and they also have a bunch of other confirmations that they're dealing with as well. So that will probably also impact timing. The other thing that will impact timing is both the House and the Senate Agriculture Committee's ability to secure floor time to actually move a bill on the House and Senate floor, which neither committee wants their bill hanging out there for too long. They want their body to act quickly. So we'll see, hopefully, the House move fairly quickly, late March, early April, and the committees will mark up a bill, i.e. they'll go through a process of amending the bill, and the members on the Agriculture Committee will have a chance to improve it, change it. And then once the committee passes that bill out of committee, then again, we'll see the bill move on the floor, and the full House will have an opportunity to offer amendments as well as vote on final passage. A couple other big picture pieces here, the budget. So the budget climate for this farm bill is not rosy. The budget climate for farm bills is not usually rosy, but this one is less rosy than the last. And in particular, because there are a huge number, I believe the number is 36, but don't quote me on that, 36 programs that are not funded following this farm bill unless Congress finds more money for them. So in other words, those programs don't have what's called a baseline continuing funding after, into the future post 2018. So Congress has to find, if they want those programs to continue, has to find money for those. And those are things like the entire rural development program doesn't have funding after this 18 Farm Bill unless Congress finds it for them. The energy title has a number of programs that don't continue with funding unless Congress finds them for them. So the budget climate is very tight. Combine that with the fact that the agriculture, kind of traditional agriculture commodity world is not in very good straits right now. So there will be additional pinch to deal with some of the agriculture commodity issues as well. The other piece of this is, from what we can tell, the agriculture committees at this point haven't taken a hit, however, in having to find more savings in their bill like they did last time around. So the last farm bill, the agriculture committee found, I believe it was around $23 billion in savings when they passed their bill. At this point, they are not being called on to find that level of savings, which is a pretty significant benefit. That could change, but that's where things are. The other thing I will mention is, from an overall theme perspective, is that last farm bill there was a lot of consolidation, a lot of streamlining, a lot of reducing duplication in programs. Those themes continue. So there are continuous efforts to try to streamline, again, kind of consolidate programs where they can to increase efficiency and delivery, et cetera. So we'll see that continue into this farm bill as well. So a little bit about the Forests and the Farm Bill Coalition. So this coalition has actually been together. It's a national coalition that works on forest priorities in the Farm Bill. I think the name is very original, of course. This coalition's been around and working together since the 2002 Farm Bill. So this is our 4th Farm Bill working together. And the coalition has grown by leaps and bounds since 2002. And I believe actually since the 14 Farm Bill, we've grown 3 times as much as the number of participants we had in the 2014 process. We now have I believe the number is 106 participants in the coalition, 106 different organizations, and that runs the gamut of landowners, conservation groups, industry, you know, everybody from Weyerhaeuser to the Wilderness Society are participants in this coalition. And the coalition came up with a range of recommendations for the Farm Bill through a process that you know, involved a series of working groups that developed ideas. And there were a huge number of recommendations that came out of those working groups. And then the coalition actually did a process to survey our entire membership, figure out where folks' priorities were, and winnow down that number to the set that is in our platform right now. We do have recommendations on funding, and the basic message we are sending on funding for the programs that impact forests are at a minimum maintain. Again, this is not a climate where we can ask for huge new slugs of money. So the you know, our approach is we have to at least maintain what we have. There are 2 exceptions to that from a funding perspective. 2 major exceptions. There's a few nuances there, but the 2 major exceptions are the coalition's asking for $12 million annually in mandatory funding for the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. And the coalition is also asking for $50 million a year in mandatory funding for the Community Wood Energy Program modified, which I can hit in a minute. So again, most of the other programs, EQIP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, et cetera, are all at a minimum maintain. So the Forest and the Farm Bill Coalition recommendations fall in these 6 buckets. 1 is support markets. So how do we, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key priorities of the Forest Climate Working Group to address climate has always been how do we enable more use of forest products. So these recommendations are along those same lines. For example, the Timber Innovation Act, which is about supporting research and development for building more buildings with wood, especially tall wood buildings, which again has a huge carbon benefit and stores carbon long term. I mentioned the Community Wood Energy Program as another program that the coalition is actually asking for a pretty significant chunk of funding for. And this program, what we're trying to do is enable this program to help address the need for markets for low value, small diameter material. This is a huge issue across the country right now, where in the West, if we want to reduce our wildfire risk and address the hazardous fuels buildup, we need to find a market for low value material, a way to sell that wood so that the cost of treatment is economical. Other parts of the country, it's not necessarily fire, but other issues where if we want to provide the habitat that folks want, if we want to address forest health issues like invasive species and other challenges, it's important to reduce and eliminate, reduce the amount of small diameter material and allow our forests to grow healthy and more resilient. Again, ties to carbon in that a healthy, resilient forest is also a forest that can sequester and store carbon more effectively. So a tool to help enable that sort of improved forest management that is essential for a variety of outcomes, including carbon. We've talked about the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. The coalition's focused on that, as well as some other recommendations that will conserve and enhance wildlife habitat in particular. And the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, we are looking for some improvements in that program that really do 2 things. One is enable forests that are already restored but provide habitat, important habitat, to clearly qualify for the program. So perhaps a landowner has an existing forest land that provides spotted owl habitat, as Jeff's example highlighted, and that forest is already providing good habitat, but the landowner needs some incentives to continue that. The idea is to clearly ensure that that land is eligible. And then secondly, the other priority recommendation for the coalition is to expand the ability for a broader range of at-risk species to qualify for the program, and in particular, species that are of greatest conservation need identified in state wildlife action plans and forest action plans. So again, trying to broaden the ability to use that program for a variety of things that enhance habitat. But also, of course, again, have carbon benefit as well. The Forest Climate Working Group has, for a very long time, had a priority of keeping forests as forests, ensuring we can retain forests, because that's one of the best ways to ensure that we can continue to capture and store carbon in forests as a huge mitigation of climate change. So the coalition does have a number of recommendations on this, in particular trying to improve the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, which is a program that supports purchasing of easements largely. There are some flexibility like HFRP in some of the program areas, but right now the program has a bit of a restriction on forest participation in it. So we are asking for a waiver that allows for forest participation in the program if the secretary determines there's an important conservation need. So the idea is to, allow forests that are a pure forest tract versus a tract that is affiliated just with a farm operation to participate in that program. We have some recommendations around addressing some fire and forest health challenges. Again, all this ties to carbon and improving carbon sequestration and storage and creating more resilient forests. Another issue that the Forest Climate Working Group also has similarities on is creating landscape scale solutions. So the idea being here that if we work at a landscape scale and focus resources in important landscapes, like if we want to think about it from a climate perspective, are there particular landscapes that are more important to addressing carbon sequestration and storage than others? Perhaps we should focus resources and scale up our work in those types of landscapes to be more effective in addressing the challenges. So that's the idea behind these landscape scale solutions is, can we actually create a program? There's actually an existing program that we're building off of that will enable more of this landscape scale focus. So that is another of the coalition's recommendations that align very nicely with the Forest Climate Working Group. And then lastly, we also have a series of recommendations around education, research, inventory, and in particular, the coalition has a recommendation on continuing to support the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program. That's a program that is run by the Forest Service and provides a huge amount of information and data about forest carbon in the US, in addition to forest stocks and forest health issues and all sorts of things. So it's a really important data source as we try to look at trends and information about what's happening in our forests and our forest carbon stocks. So a lot of the estimates that USDA does on and EPA does on greenhouse gas inventories and forests come partially from that FIA data. So again, that's kind of the series, and there's all sorts of recommendations under each of these categories I didn't go into. You're welcome to visit AFF's website and find those recommendations right on our website. But thought I would hit some of those that intersect closely with the Forest Climate Working Group's priorities as well. So one other issue that I'll just raise that also impacts the Farm Bill, although may not be a Farm Bill issue, is the fact that even as we're trying to improve these programs, even as we're trying to ensure that we can continue to have funding support, if we don't solve this wildfire funding problem that the Forest Service has, and for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the issue is that over time, as wildfires become more and more expensive and more extensive across the country, the Forest Service has to pay more for fighting fires, which ultimately ends up eating more of the agency's budget. That's basically the bottom line here. Oops, sorry, I will go back. That's the bottom line here. And so you can see here in this graphic where in 1995, wildfire costs were about 16% of the agency budget. And by 2025, and this estimate has actually been dropped, I think, to 2022 now, fire will consume a huge portion of the agency's budget. So about 67% there is the estimate. So we can create all these opportunities in Farm Bill programs to improve forests, but if we don't ensure that the main agency in the government, in addition to NRCS, the Forest Service, can support programs outside of fire, because again, as these firefighting costs increase, there's less and less funding to support things like helping private forest landowners manage their land or managing public forests. So a huge challenge that also needs to be addressed, and we believe is important, just as important as addressing some of those Farm Bill recommendations as well. So that is the status of the Farm Bill and the kind of current layout of the Forest and the Farm Bill Coalition's recommendations. What we're hearing right now from the Hill is we've actually gotten very good reception from the Hill on our recommendations that I've walked through and many others. The devil's still in the details as to whether or not they'll be included in the Agriculture Committee's bills, but we are getting fairly good reception, in particular on a lot of the policy changes we're talking about. The funding issues will be an ongoing battle simply because of the budget climate we are operating in. So with that, that's essentially kind of where things are with the Farm Bill, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren to facilitate questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rita. That was very informative. And to do questions, I'll catch you before you take your screen away. One of the first questions we have is, you shared a table of acreage and by state of projects, I believe under the HFRP. Oh yeah, so somebody had a question. Do you know what's going on in Maine in this case? I'm not sure if you're, or Jeff, you may know as well.
Yeah, Rita, do you know specifically, or?
You go ahead, Jeff. If you,
okay,
I
yeah.
can answer it. But.
I was looking that up, and yeah, I don't have all the data in front of me handy, but I can tell you there's 420,000 acres in two 10-year restoration contracts in Maine. So very large enrollments, very large projects. Two of them, 2/3 of it, are in 10-year restoration contracts, which I imagine, I think I saw are about halfway done. So.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Jeff, the key thing about the Healthy Forest Reserve Program that's different from some of the other conservation programs is there is no limit on the size of the landowner that can participate in this program. So yes, to just reiterate Jeff's point, there are a couple of very, very large private forest owners participating in that program in Maine.
So yeah, that would come about because of the lack of AGI. I mean, so you can have fairly large corporations participate in this program, and the upside of that is you can get very large projects in place. Mm-hmm. So, yep. Hope that answers your question to some degree.
Yeah, thank you for that. Another related question is, Jeff, you had mentioned that carbon sequestration requirements are a part of this program now, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. What does that look like, and is there actual monitoring in place for that?
Yeah, that's defined pretty broadly. That would be done by our in-state biological specialists that would make that determination to decide what those practices are and to what to what level of significance they would occur. So whatever the practice they have in mind to meet that. Again, it's not really finely defined. It's pretty broadly defined. carbon sequestration.
So you're saying there just has to be some sort of carbon considerations in a project that like to be accepted into this program?
Yeah, but again, to what degree, to what, how that's measured and how that's determined is done on a state-by-state, project-by-project manner. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another question is you had mentioned that, and you mentioned this as well, that there has not been funding for the HFRP in recent years, but then you had laid out some investments, some other investments, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, about where those are coming from, and if those are expected to continue if the HFRP is not funded directly.
Is that a question for me or for Rita?
It could be for either of you, I suppose.
I can only speak to HF, and I'll just tell you what I've observed. I don't have an opinion about it, or whatever the administration offers. So currently under HFRP, it has been authorized but not appropriated. Under RCPP, there's some of the programs that Rita has in her table there are contributing programs. HFRP has not had funds to contribute, so they've benefited from getting some of the, so it goes into this, it creates this annual bucket of $100 million, and HFRP has benefited from receiving funds from that. So it's been kind of a way for partners to submit projects and to use those programs that would address, in one of those three purposes.
Okay.
And Lauren, maybe a little bit more color on that as well. So yeah, in the last Farm Bill, even though we weren't able to get funding, mandatory funding, and the difference between mandatory and discretionary is mandatory is provided through the Farm Bill, and for all intents and purposes, with some issues, required. Congress basically funds it and then it's done, whereas discretionary, it goes through the annual appropriations process. And what Jeff's referring to is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is the idea behind that program is any kind of organizations, usually it's nonprofits or agencies, apply to the program and say, we want to do a landscape scale project using a variety of authorities that the USDA has, that USDA NRCS has, including some might be forested properties, some might be agriculture properties, et cetera. So they smush all those authorities together to do a landscape scale project. And what Jeff's talking about is that there are some applicants that have applied and received funding to fund forest-related projects through the Healthy Forest Reserve Program under that Regional Conservation Partnership Program.
I see. Thanks to you both. That was very helpful. So for the last question that I have here is, oh, I might have another one. Well, one question that I have here is about the EQUIP program, which is clearly a large amount of money. And Rita, I was really interested to read or to hear that it covers afforestation, reforestation, and improved forest management. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how those mechanisms work, if it's direct funding to landowners, and then if there are carbon considerations there as well.
Yeah, so the Environmental Quality Incentives Program has been around for quite a while, actually. I'm trying to find my graph here. So the program is a cost share program. So what that means is that instead of doing more long-term agreements like the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, easements like the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, what this program does is a landowner applies and says, I want to do some thinning on my property to improve forest health, or I want to plant some trees on my property to improve wildlife, soil quality, etc. And so the program is actually directed, the kind of key priorities of the program are to improve soil health, and I think water quality is in there. There's a few other priorities, which of course forests help contribute to. So a landowner applies and says, I want to do this practice, and then NRCS will evaluate that application, evaluate it based on their state level priorities. States set different priorities for forests. And then once the landowner is accepted and they've signed a contract, essentially NRCS will pay some of the cost. The landowner has to contribute a chunk as well, pay some of the cost of doing that practice. And again, the reason being that there are benefits of a landowner doing that practice: water quality, soil health, habitat, all those sorts of benefits. From a carbon perspective, there is no evaluation of projects and applicants based on their carbon benefit. But I would argue that a lot of the practices that are being done, and I wish I do have a pie chart in our Farm Bill report that shows you the breakdown of the forest practices. And there are a lot of practices in there that are known to improve carbon sequestration and storage. Things like tree planting, things like thinning that reduces fire risk and improves long-term forest health and resiliency. Those sorts of kinds of practices that have carbon benefit.
Thank you very much for that, Rita. And I did have one more question come in, and I'm not sure I understand it well. I tried to communicate back with this person. I realized they can't see my comment to them, but I think their question is exploring the. We have new large conversations going on about infrastructure, and where is the case for natural infrastructure in these larger, like, national level infrastructure questions. And this person also mentioned dealing with flooding in the Mid-Atlantic and riparian management seems to be leaning towards gray infrastructure. So are you aware of any connection then between the Farm Bill or wood utilization and natural infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there definitely are a lot of folks who have been trying to figure out how to bring natural infrastructure, green infrastructure, into the conversation on infrastructure. I don't think anybody has been successful yet in kind of gaining the attention and figuring out how to bring that into the fold. And so that could run the gamut of everything from addressing flooding issues like you described to investing in easement programs that provide green space and offset some of the impacts of gray infrastructure. And it could also include things like investing in wooden bridges and other wood-based infrastructure investments, road barriers, things like that can all be built out of wood. And there's been a lot of proven testing that's been done on that. So there is a lot of opportunity there. There are a number of groups that are trying to figure out how to get in that game. I don't think anybody has figured out how to get in the game yet.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I did get one more question that came in, and this was directed towards you, Rita. Do you have any thoughts about how the Forest Legacy Program will be affected by the 2018 Farm Bill?
Yeah, so the Forest Legacy Program, for background for folks, is a permanent easement program and it also allows for fee simple for acquisition of lands as well. It's run by the state forestry agencies in the states, and it's housed in the U.S. Forest Service. Obviously, acquiring land and purchasing easements to protect forests long-term has huge carbon benefit, and again, a key priority of the Forest Climate Working Group. In terms of the Farm Bill, so the Farm Bill did authorize and create the Forest Legacy Program back in the 90s. The Farm Bill, the Forest Legacy Program is actually not funded through the Farm Bill. It's funded through the annual appropriations process from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So it's a little different funding mechanism. So the most the Farm Bill would do to the Forest Legacy Program, if it is brought up, is tweak the authority, change the authority in the program, change the legislation essentially, rather than deal with the funding. And what's to be expected on that? Our coalition did not have any recommendations. on the Forest Legacy Program for improving it. The last couple of farm bills, the agriculture committees have, in some cases, proposed capping the Forest Legacy Program and the funding for the program at certain amounts. That's largely been what some of the recommendations have been in the past. So could we see those again, potentially? I don't know. I have not seen anything to suggest that. But that's kind of the extent to which the Farm Bill could address the Forest Legacy Program, is again kind of changing the policy behind it.
Well, thank you for that, Rita. That was really interesting and helpful. And I think that's it for the questions. We are closing in here at the end of our hour. And so I want to thank you both. Thank you to Jeff and to Rita again for your time, sharing your insight. This was really useful, very, very informative and timely. And thank you also to the Forest Climate Working Group and the Steering Committee and their support in bringing forward these learning series. We really appreciate everyone joining us. And again, this is a reminder that we will have another one a month from now, the first Wednesday of April 4th at 3 p.m. with Rachel Steele. And please keep an eye out for the announcement of that. And if we have your email, we'll go ahead and send you an invite as soon as we have that prepared. And again, you can email us at forestc@msu.edu if you want to get on our mailing list. We will be reaching out about that. And that's it. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch when these are posted and available for your use in the future on our website. Take care. Have a great rest of your week.